I'm James, but everyone knows me as Jamie. Nice to meet you guys. Welcome. Thanks for coming along. Tonight we are actually very lucky to have.
Are you?
We are. Yes, we are. We are to have a guest of a different calibre. We've got.
Whoa!
Yeah.
No
Burn!
Yes. Well, you are. I mean, like.
Oh, that was such shade.
Novelist, poet, producer, award-winning playwright as well. Everybody, James Goss.
Whoa!
Well, that was embarrassing.
I think that's the point. You know, it's just like.
That's my ego done. I can go now. Records that my parents bought me, and they bought me vinyl before it was trendy. They bought me the Genesis of the Daleks album and the Boney M album, and I became a gay Doctor Who fan. And you're there, kind of going, "Mum and Dad, you really should have thought that one through." And obviously, you know, I was very young at the time, so imagine, you know, because as children do, I listened to Genesis of the Daleks obsessively. And I listened to Rasputin obsessively, but with no real idea about what Doctor Who was. And then Doctor Who came on the television, and not only were the Daleks back in Doctor Who, but Boney M were fighting the Daleks. And I was there going, this is brilliant. And to this day, just the whole, you know, I cannot watch Destiny of the Daleks without thinking it's Boney M.
How did you get involved professionally writing for Doctor Who?
But I started working professionally on Doctor Who because back in 2000 I was doing websites for the BBC. When there were websites in the year 2000. You're all far too young to realise that.
I do.
And basically a friend said, "You like Doctor Who, could you come and edit the BBC's Doctor Who website, because we do have somebody who looks after it, but she doesn't watch television. She's an ex-nun. She's just come out of a monastery and she thinks that John Pertwee is still Doctor Who." She was the person who was looking after the BBC's cult TV stuff. So I went, "Oh, I actually quite like all of these shows." So that was how I started working on Doctor Who and doing things like that, and I was still around when they brought the show back, so I did the website for the first 2.5 years of the show being back, and then went quietly mad and went and did something else. One of the great things about being in Wales when the show came back, because they moved me down to Wales, which it was. I had a lovely little office, but getting to work with Russell and Julie was absolutely amazing, because it was really lovely. Julie found me a corner of her office that I could work in. So they turned the stationery cupboard into my little office. So I was kind of like Harry Potter in that I had a tiny little office under the stairs where I made the websites for Doctor Who. And it was a genuinely lovely, gifted place to work. And there were some really brilliant, kind people at BBC Wales. And Russell is one of the most lovely people you could ever know. So yeah, actually getting to be around all that, and it was Cardiff in those days was a really small place, which sounds really rude to say about Cardiff, but Cardiff Bay had only really just been built, so there were only a couple of shops down in Cardiff Bay. So you would have that slightly awkward thing where you'd be fishing around in the ready meals and suddenly realise that you and David Tennant were reaching for the last prawn stir fry, and it'd be that whole sort of like, the two of you would look at each other and be like, yeah, anyway, no. Because it was still that period when David Tennant could go to a supermarket without people knowing he was David Tennant, because his first year was still filming. So nobody knew who he was. Whereas I'd be there going, oh, it's David. And then you think, we have actually just spent 10 hours avoiding each other on set. This is probably enough for us both. But it meant that I still remember the wrap party for Daleks in Manhattan, where we were in a hotel, and there was this lovely guy there who was like, oh, I didn't realise all you people were so fun. I've just been sat in my hotel room for a couple of weeks. I'd have loved to have gone out drinking with you all. And we were like, And you are? And he went, Andrew Garfield. And we went, I know. And we were all, even then we were all going, oh, he seems lovely. Oh, we could have all been out drinking with Andrew Garfield, and we'd all been out.
Andrew Garfield experiments.
But yeah.
Yeah. Oh. He's in Daleks in Manhattan.
That's awesome.
And we.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I made some awful mistakes while I worked at BBC Wales, but my biggest is never going out drinking with Andrew Garfield.
It must be quite something actually being there when the series was actually being produced. I mean, I can understand it might be a bit manic at the same time, but it must be quite a thing to know that Doctor Who's coming back to the telly and actually to be there in the midst of it when it's being made.
It was weird, especially on season 1, because there was this whole thing where season 1 was, I know Doctor Who is now made in complete secrecy, but series 1, it was this very weird thing where people at the BBC either really cared about Doctor Who and therefore had to know everything about it, or a large chunk of the BBC did not give a hoot. It was things like there would be mad Doctor Who fans in our building who would try and find out stuff from you. So it would be a whole thing where we had to start locking. When I first was given scripts, I had to go to Cardiff, read the scripts, and they said, do you want to take them away with you? And I went, I daren't. But yeah, they're actually getting to go on set and just realising it actually looked really good. And it doesn't mean that you're expecting it to fail, but you had this sort of thing of the BBC had not made something like Doctor Who, and having read the scripts, knowing how brilliant the scripts were, and you thought, yeah, they're going to end up screwing it up. Because there was just this fear at the back of your head that the BBC just didn't know how to make something as brilliant as Russell had written. And yet you'd keep on going on set and going, this looks amazing. Like going on set for End of the World and thinking, oh, I can't wait to see the space station, I can't wait to see the space station, and then going, they're filming it in a building. And there's this bit in your head going, well, that's wrong, it must be a space station set. And then you walk inside the Temple of Peace and you just go, this is amazing. And everything that you saw was amazing. And I got to look after Roger Hancock, who's the Daleks' agent, for his first day on set, because we'd sort of chatted and we knew each other very, very slightly. And they just went, if he's really hating it, we need somebody to look after him when he goes to see the Dalek. So I had to chaperone the Dalek's agent, and he sat there on the train. So you're sitting there on the train all the way down to Cardiff with this guy going, if it's terrible, I'll shut it down. I will shut it down. And you're there going, it'll be brilliant. Going, because I am not a tactful person. I'm there going, I'm going to put my foot in it, I'm going to put my foot in it, and the BBC will lose the Daleks, and it will be because of me. Would you like some more biscuits, Roger? Desperately trying to make small talk with somebody who's there going, and if I take out the Daleks, I also own the rights to these comedy shows, and I will take those away, and I will show the BBC how to treat me properly, because if they get the Daleks wrong, this is so important. They cannot get the Daleks wrong. If I don't like it, oh, I'll make them suffer. And you're there going, oh my God. And then you turn up and you just see the Dalek and you go, this is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. It was so exciting. And the thing was, there was Roger looking at the Dalek going, now, they've done that brilliantly. We aren't going to have any problems here. And then he turns around and goes, who are the kids? And Billie Piper's brought her whole family along.
Blimey.
So you've got this whole row of little mini Billie Pipers all sat on little chairs looking at the Dalek, and you've got Roger Hancock going, do I get to meet Billie Piper? And it's just one of those extraordinary days that you're just part of. That first year was just these constant mad things where you just found yourself sort of finding out extraordinary and exciting things. Like the first time they filmed with the Cybermen in year 2, those costumes were incredibly uncomfortable. They were also really cold. And that Cyberman block was filmed during appalling winter weather. And so I'm there going, I'm going to get to see the Cybermen. I'm going to get to see the Cybermen marching on. This is going to be brilliant. And what I hadn't realised was that for dummy runs, the Cybermen were all wearing dressing gowns. So you heard stomp, stomp, stomp. They came around the corner and there were 6 Cybermen all wearing dressing gowns. And you're going, well, it's a look. I got to wear a Cyberman suit once to help out on a DVD extra, and I was appalling in it. And also, they are so painful, it is untrue. there was a welt on my leg that stayed there for 3 months.
Blimey.
And that wasn't caused by a sharp edge or anything, that was caused by compressed foam. I know, but they did lose Cybermen because the costumes were so uncomfortable. But apparently being a Dalek is quite cosy, so there you go.
You get to sit down.
Yeah,
know.
you can.
Comic-Con.
Yeah, you can sit down. You can fit a hot water bottle in there. It's all quite snug.
I was wanting to ask you about your novelizations of Douglas Adams' work, The Pirate Planet, etc. And I was wondering, you seem to capture Douglas Adams very well and brilliantly, actually, in your writing. Did you find there was any challenges actually having to write a novel that was based on Adams' work at all?
Oh yes, but that was solved for me very early on by a fan site. Because when it was announced that I was doing City of Death, a fan site published this thing going, couldn't they have found somebody better than him? And once that came out, literally 2 days after I'd signed the contract, once that came out, I went, oh, actually that's quite helpful, really. Because they had this list of authors who would have been better than me to have done it. And I went, whatever I do is going to be wrong. So as soon as you start out with that point and you just go, oh, that's actually quite helpful. And it actually stopped me from worrying about it and allowed me to just have some fun. But that honestly really helped. And City of Death was enormous fun. Because whatever I did with City of Death was going to be wrong, because it is one of the finest written Doctor Who stories, it's one of the finest Doctor Who stories, and the novel, it was so important the novel was not rubbish. And so trying to make that not rubbish was very hard. Pirate Planet was a lot easier because that was when I had access to the Douglas Adams archive. And that is the Douglas Adams archive is at St John's College and is looked after by a woman called Miss Marvin. And she was very helpful in that she was the person who, because I said, do you have any spare stuff? And if you don't know the story, it is amazing. And she said, oh, we've got some stuff that you might enjoy looking at. Because with City of Death, I had 4 extra pages, but Miss Marvin produced 2 complete unused drafts of The Pirate Planet, completely different from what was on screen. So The Pirate Planet was really easy because I basically had so much stuff to fit in because I had just masses and masses and masses of stuff, because a normal Doctor Who script is about 15,000 words long. So most novels are based on a 15,000 word script, whereas the first draft of The Pirate Planet I think was nearly 40,000 words. And then there's the second draft, which is Douglas going, well, could you make this, which is extraordinarily different from what ended up on screen. So you've then got another 20,000 words of material that you've got to try and fit in. Just the whole idea that Douglas Adams went, I think Romana should do impressions of chickens. Which, when you realise he wrote this before Mary Tam had been cast, as soon as you think Mary Tam in a feather ball gown, standing on one leg clucking, and you just think, that is amazing. And it is such a great story, and you realise that what ended up on screen was cut and then cut and then cut, and all the explanations were left out, and then more was cut. So there are whole subplots from Douglas's original thing that literally end up just being Mary Tam walking through a wet field in the rain with a couple of men wearing a duvet cover. And you just go, but there's 20 whole pages of Douglas Adams that have just been thrown away. And, my work with the Douglas Adams archive was all like that.
We were wanting to ask you about, obviously you've recently have published Now We Are 600, which I think is actually a really kind of like winning and witty kind of anthology of poetry. How easy or how difficult do you find poetry comes to you?
Well, what an embarrassing question.
Sorry.
Because it is incredibly embarrassing that I've written a book of Doctor Who poetry. I enjoyed it enormously, but when you sit there and go, well, now let me talk to you about my poetry. My testicles are cringing, so I don't know about yours. But it really was just the thing where the editor at BBC Books is just the nicest man in the world, and he said, look, I've had an idea for a book of children's poetry that spoofs A.A. Milne. And I'm going, what? And he goes, could you just do something? And I go, actually, this would be enormous fun. And it was enormous fun. It was great fun working on it. And they said, well, we'll get somebody good to illustrate it. And I'm like, that would be nice. And then I get a phone call, and I'm away on holiday, and I get the phone call, and it's the publisher. He says, I've got an illustrator for your poetry book. And I'm like, good, I'm going to get started on the poems at any moment. You know, I'm going to be really serious about my book of poetry that I'm actually taking very seriously. He goes, yeah, we've got a really good illustrator for this book of poetry. I go, who is it? And they go, Russell. At which point I go, am I fired? And burst into tears. Because obviously if they got Russell to do the drawings, that means they're going to get somebody proper to write the poems. And they go, no, you can carry on. And so my boyfriend just sort of wanders in and sees me crying and goes, oh my God, what's happened? I go, oh no, it's just about my book of poetry. And he goes, it's going to be like this from now on, isn't it? But I also got to, we did a small tour. We did some evenings together where people basically turned up to meet Russell and then would have to listen to me read some poems before they could talk to Russell. And honestly, that was astonishing, because Russell did this thing where they would, I think we sold out at Foyles, and Russell said, I will stay open, you know, I will stay there for as long as the fans want me. Which was astonishing, because Russell just talked to them all. Every single fan he talked to. So there was this long queue, and Foyles by that point had gone, it's gone 11 o'clock at night. He's been signing stuff for 3.5 hours. But Russell just stayed and met everyone and talked to everyone and was as brilliantly Russell with all of them. And you're just there going, that is astonishing. Also, I was starving by the time it was over and very tired. And there was Russell still happily talking and chatting away, and then at the end just sort of waved goodnight and just wandered off. And I'm there going, I now want to go and sleep for days. And I hadn't had to talk to 400 people.
We some of us are big kind of fans of the kind of the character of the Valeyard. Was there a push to have the Valeyard within that volume? Or
no, I was literally allowed to do any old toot that I wanted. They did make me take out a poem about Susan in The Edge of Destruction because it was too niche. I think it was called Susie Scissors, and it was. You see, it's brilliant. Niche. It's really niche, and they just went, "What is this?" And I went,
love that episode. I love
yeah,
it's genuinely quite scary.
And you know, as part of the poetry tour that I went on, you know, I got to get the audience to help me perform a poem about the Rani, which I thought was hilarious. It wasn't in the book. I just thought this is really funny. But yeah, it was just an enormous hoot.
Moving on to Big Finish. Sometimes we're kind of worried about, not worried, but we're curious about what are the challenges of having to write within a certain continuity, within certain ranges. For example, Torchwood's or Blake's 7, for example.
Big Finish is great at finding a little crack in continuity and planting those beautiful seeds in there, and then watching them flourish. And it's one of the great things I enjoy about Torchwood, because I love Torchwood. I absolutely adored Torchwood when it happened when I was at the BBC. I've always loved Torchwood. I could not tell you why, because I'm just, you know, I am genuinely obsessed by Torchwood. I think it's brilliant. It does everything that I need a science fiction show to do, but with filthy jokes. There is that lovely shambolic sense about Torchwood of they're brilliant and they save the world, but my God, they're a mess. But yeah, I mean that is the thing. They're the same universe, but they're such different worlds. And we've done some really brilliantly odd things where we've sort of done some crossovers this year. So we did, purely for the cover, we did a sequel to Night of the Fendal starring Eve Miles.
Brilliant. It's really
just
good.
Because, I mean, if you've never seen the cover, it is Gwen Cooper but as the Fendal. Because literally we went, that would be hilarious. What is the story? I don't care. That would be hilarious. And Tim Foley, who's a brilliant author, wrote this astonishing piece that's all about the male gaze and female revenge, and basically it's astonishing, and the bit where we knew we got it right was when somebody went, I worked on, and it was a man.
Okay.
It was a man, and he went, I've worked on film sets for years and I've never seen women treated like that. I don't think this is realistic. And you go, right, there we go. But yeah, that is, and if anybody has ever listened to Night of the Fendal, it features a truly grotesque scene that would never actually happen in proper Doctor Who, but it's so incredibly Torchwood. And I won't give it away now, but it was a moment where Approvals, who let us get away with murder, went, what? But it's so weird talking about it because some people here will not have heard it, and it is honestly, you know, if you've never listened to a Big Finish, go and listen to Night of the Fendal, because it is everything. And it also manages to just engage with some themes from the original Fendal story and just turn them on their head in a way that makes you go, oh, nice.
I've listened to it myself and I can't...
You know the moment.
I know it, it's brilliant. It's a really, really good story. I think it's the first it's the first story that I know of, especially that brings in the Fendal. You've written 3 stories, brilliant stories, for Sir Derek Jacobi's War Master, who I think we all love. Yeah. Do you find it... is it more enjoyable writing for villains? Do you like writing for bad guys? Is it nice to write stories where, like, for the master wins, for example?
That's what I was going to say, because the thing about... I mean, I love the Master, but the Master is crap. And I mean that fondly. And the great thing about Derek Jacobi's Master is that not only does he put in the hours, he also wins. That's what's fantastic, in that he's competent. Many of the Masters over the years have given us so many things, but what they haven't really given us is success. And what is unique about the War Master is you look at him and you go, not only have you had a plan, you've actually seen it all the way through to the end. It's not just about putting in the hours, it's about actually being good at your job. The only other Master I'd argue who deserves to win is the Roger Delgado Master. But even then, you do look at him and go, you're charming, but have you really thought this plan through? Or are you simply getting away with charm and a little bit of work? You always suspect that he far more enjoys being driven around in a limo by his chauffeur while he smokes fine cigars and drinks port. And you get the feeling that there's a meeting room with people going, he's going to turn up because we have stuff to tell him. And he's there going, no, I'm just going to pull over my limousine and just change into disguise and pretend to be a British Telecom engineer. And they're going, there's stuff you need to know about the hallucinatory dragon. And you know that's the thing. You will forgive the Master anything because he has such style. But also because if you ever actually dared say, Scurry, can I just go over that thing? You would be dead. Nobody has ever actually sat the Master down and gone, what are you up to? You know, my ultimate dream, my absolute dream would be a thing where all the Masters met and swapped plans. You know, I'd love to imagine that the Masters have an annual general meeting where they all actually get together.
Convention.
Yeah, and just go, so how have things been with you in prehistoric times with your Concorde? You know, you can honestly imagine Michelle Gomez, you know, Missy sitting there at the head of the table, just sort of going, all right, and just working her way through the list, gently and slowly, whilst they are all waiting for Derek Jacobi to turn up and tell them that sadly, yet again, he's actually had a scheme and it's succeeded. And you just sense all the other Masters burn with resentment at Derek Jacobi because yet again, he sort of had a plan, carried it out, won, walked off laughing.
You probably get asked this a lot. How mad was it actually working with Tom on Scratchman?
I love Tom. That's not an evasive answer. I genuinely, actually adore Tom, which is, Tom loves to be adored. And I'm also terrified of Tom. But that's actually all right. One of the weird things I've discovered, because the first time Big Finish let me write one Tom Baker story, which I've never dared listen to, because the whole day was just so incredibly overwhelming, because it's that thing where they went, Tom, this is your writer for today. And I'm there going, I don't want to speak to Tom Baker. And then having to write a book with Tom, and Tom's like, and you're there going, I can't, the whole thing was just sort of making inarticulate squeaks in a room near Tom Baker. And then Tom goes, well, here's my email address. And you're going, what? So, and it didn't cause a few problems with the project, because Tom would email me and I wouldn't answer the email. I wouldn't even dare open it for 3 or 4 days. It would just sit there unread in my inbox because it says Tom Baker. And you're like, what? Because, there are things that can and cannot email you. It's like, my bank can email me, and that's never good news. But that's fine because it's my bank. A friend of mine can email me. That's fine because it's my friend and I know. But the idea that Tom Baker has my email address and is emailing me stuff, or, in the same way that, I've had to email Russell my book of poetry, which, even said out loud is so embarrassing. If you wrote some poems, you wouldn't email them to your best friend, Russell. And similarly, having to actually sort of work with Tom, and Tom saying, I've had some ideas, here are some jokes, can you work these in? Here are some thoughts, can we do this? What do you think of this? And you're there going, what? I wish I could be talking about it as though I'm relating to it as a grown-up, and getting to have meetings with Tom where you're talking about writing together. And the only thing that was joyous about it was that sometimes these meetings would take place at the Mermaid Inn in Rye, which is one of the most haunted hotels in England. Mm-hmm. And because Tom is Tom, sometimes he quite likes to sort of hold forth at the Mermaid Inn in Rye. And it's full of incredibly posh, rich people who've stayed overnight. And so there was one day when Tom and I were sitting chatting, and there's Tom, and this couple just walked past. Tom can't even see them. But it's got really loud floorboards, does the Mermaid Inn in Rye. So you can just hear this creak, creak, creak as this couple walk past, and they stop because they realise that there's Tom Baker. Tom's got his back to them, and his hand just shoots up and goes, yes, it's me! And then you hear this really fast creak, creak, creak as they just scamper away, and then he turns back and goes, yes. And, and you're there going, this is weird. There is a script that exists for Scratchman, but not a word of it is used in the novel of Scratchman.
Wow.
Because the legal ownership of the script is uncertain.
Okay.
So the script has a title page that asserts the authorship of the script and therefore asserts the copyright, and that belongs to a man called James Hill, I think, who is quite famous as the man who created Wurzel Gummidge for television. Who's a very established film producer and writer, and it is asserted that he wrote that script. Tom, if you speak to Tom, says he organised it, he added a few lines here and there, but Tom says he and Ian Marter wrote the script. But Tom also says that the storyline is definitely his, and the title page acknowledges that the storyline is Tom's and Ian Marter's. So because there is this legal quandary, because James Hill is dead, it just seemed easier to go, well, we'll take the storyline and we'll start from that. But it also, one of the things is that Tom's given interviews in the past where he's talked about the story of Scratchman, and it's very different from the script that exists. So it was one of the things we did with Scratchman was sit down with Tom and say, so what would you like the storyline to be? Which I realised my voice is very high then, sorry. But it was very interesting trying to go back to Tom and say, what did you actually want the story to be? How do you see it evolving? And in many ways, Tom wanted something that was a lot darker than the script for Scratchman that exists. So we're able to take that as the basis of the storyline and then work with Tom to get closest to the ideas that he'd originally had, that were curiously predate the Wicker Man, but are very similar to the Wicker Man. So it was a
set on an island off the north coast of Scotland.
Set on a remote island, and there's an awful lot of wicker in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it also, we honoured the original storyline, which is quite strange in that the first half is a very gothically horrible story that feels like it very much comes from the early time of Tom's work on Doctor Who, and then the second half is bonkers and is clearly sort of almost like unfettered Tom Bacon-ness. You know, it belongs in the same genre as I think my next companion should be a talking cabbage. But there's a real heart and soul to it as well, and trying to work with Tom to honour the madness, but also the whole sort of, oh, that's really quite, yeah. But God, it's been an absolute privilege to work on something like that. And, even the audiobook recording, which if you've never heard the audiobook of Scratchman, do, because it's basically improvisational performance art by Tom. In that, I'm listening to it and I'm going, wow, because he's clearly just, it's kind of like him waving goodbye to it now that he's happy with it. It's extraordinary, that audiobook reading. It's full of improvisations and Tom laughing at his own jokes. It is such a reading. It's quite something. And it's worth buying just for the way that Tom pronounces the phrase chapter 27. Just those words explain why that man dominated television in the 1970s.
I was wanting to ask about Death Comes to Time and The Scream of Shalka, about they seem to have their own continuity. Was it quite freeing, or maybe not, being able to do what you wanted, essentially? Because obviously these were written before Doctor Who was announced, before it came back to the telly. Sorry.
I mean, they were just... I wish I could find a nice way of saying it. They were both horrible projects to work on. There was an overall feeling at the BBC, literally my head of department called me into a meeting room in 2004 and said, well, how much longer do you see Doctor Who lasting then? And, that was when they were looking at axing the Doctor Who website. Because they went, it's popular, but we are super serving an audience. That was a phrase that they used to use then. We are super serving an audience. How much longer do you really think Doctor Who's got in it? What are you going to move on to? Now that I look back on it 15 years later, I do feel slightly embarrassed. Literally, the BBC at the time did not love Doctor Who. And Doctor Who would not have come back if it wasn't for the fact that Jane Tranter, who was amazing, really wanted to make Doctor Who because she was amazing. And Russell really wanted to make Doctor Who because he was amazing. And Julie Gardner really wanted to make Doctor Who because she was amazing. If it hadn't been for those three amazing people, Doctor Who would not have come back. It might have come back a few years later, but it wouldn't have been made by Russell, Jane and Julie. So it would have been a very different beast.
Was there mixed emotions? Well, obviously I think there would be mixed emotions when they announced that the show was coming back to our telescreens.
Well...
Because you were...
See, I mean, the thing is that you've watched the DV extras, so you know that one of the things that Scream of the Shalka did was that, and I will do this as quickly as I can, because you've watched this afternoon, one of the things is that when we were doing Scream of the Shalka, it was a proper full animation, and suddenly we're all gunning ahead doing a full animation for Doctor Who's 30th anniversary. 30th? 40th?
40th, yeah, 40th.
I'm not that old, thank God. Yeah, 40th anniversary. The BBC was doing nothing for Doctor Who's 40th anniversary. So the reason was we went, Scream of the Shalka, we're going to do a full feature-length animated series. It's going to be full animation. It's going to be great. And somebody at the BBC went, oh, hang on, we might not own the rights to Doctor Who. Oh. We might actually have sold the rights. You might not be able to do that. The things that you've done, they're not full frame. It's all fine. Don't worry, we're not going to fire you. Possibly, we need to have an inquiry, but you need to make sure that we've got the rights. So my lovely researcher Daniel Judd, I literally said, Daniel, could you find out if we've got the rights or not to Doctor Who? And so Daniel kept on asking. Literally, it was something like a 6, 7, 8 month project where every Monday I would say, have we got the rights to Doctor Who? And Daniel was literally going around the BBC, and there is this BBC adage that you have to hear 99 no's before you hear one yes. And that was literally what Daniel was doing, going from department to department to department, until he finally ended up speaking to somebody who went, oh no, it's absolutely fine. We own the rights. go do what you will. And so Daniel kept all this paper trail, put it all in a folder and went, brilliant, we can go ahead with our project. The next thing I knew is that my boss was summoned for a... That's one way in which the BBC communicates with itself. Okay. Sometimes it makes you feel brilliant about a thing that you've done. Sometimes it makes you feel really terrible about a thing that you've not done. And literally my boss was summoned for a... And he was told, why are you making this Doctor Who cartoon? We don't own the rights. And my boss went, what? And he quickly ran back over, collected Daniel Judd's folder, ran back to this meeting and went, we do own the rights, here is our paperwork that proves it. At which point the person who... Would you just mind if I kept a copy of that? And that was literally it, because what had been happening is that Lorraine Hegarty, the controller of BBC One, had kept on giving these public statements where she'd said, I'd love to make Doctor Who, but we don't have the rights. I'd love to make Doctor Who, but we don't have the rights. I'm told we don't have the rights to Doctor Who, but I'd love to make it. We suddenly announce that we're making Doctor Who. Somebody goes, you've embarrassed Lorraine, this is bad. My brilliant boss, Martin, then says, but we do have the rights to Doctor Who. And then a few months later, Martin is called across for another meeting. He wears this hang-dog expression, but I don't know why. Maybe it, and it's really good. And he comes back and he goes, oh my God, they're making Doctor Who. And that's all because Martin is brilliant in meetings, I am not, and Daniel, my lovely researcher, had got the rights. So whatever your feelings about Scream the Shalka, and I think it's brilliant, without Scream the Shalka, Doctor Who would not have happened for some time, because lovely Daniel spent all that time doing all of that grunt work, clearing the rights. So when the BBC decided it wanted to make Doctor Who, it basically happened very quickly because all that paperwork had been done because Daniel was meticulous at paperwork. So that was great, but it also meant that we knew, before Scream the Shalka even went out, we knew it was a one-off. We knew it was doomed, but also we couldn't say a word. So we all had to sit on our hands whilst people were going, oh, I don't think, is the future of Doctor Who really just a cartoon? Doctor Who magazine were poisonously horrible to us. And we had to sit there and go, yeah, and they were like, it's an insult. The future of Doctor Who shouldn't just be a cartoon. And we're there going, I'm sorry you feel that way. That is how Scream the Shalka helped Doctor Who. It would have happened anyway, because the people who were doing it were so brilliant, but it happened more quickly because of Daniel Judd. So that's a reason to make you go, oh, Scream the Shalka, brilliant. Not, oh, Scream the Shalka, well, that was a bit of a dead end. Oh my God, are we done?
Done.
I mean, thank you so much for all of your...
No, thank you for coming, thank you.